I feel like this conversation is one of the most, I think, beautifully authentic and vulnerable that we've ever had on this show. I love this path that you're carving out about authenticity and honesty. And you mentioned earlier, being open and talking publicly about, contracting an STI. And if you look at the numbers, it's like the majority of people who are sexually active, in this country at least, I don't really know the stats all over the world, but at some point or another will contract some form of an STI. Not everyone, right? But the vast majority of people. And it is still such a taboo, and there is so much shame around it. So I would love for you to share, your thoughts around why you've chosen to speak about this. And maybe first we can start with, how this happened for you and what your sort of, I guess, decisions and feelings about yourself were, and like maybe what you went through. Was there any sort of healing that was done around that emotionally?
Thank you. So I will start by saying, trigger warning again. I contracted HSV2, which is herpes 2, herpes simplex B, lots of names for it, which doesn't make understanding STIs any easier. So when I contracted it, the stigma surrounding herpes specifically is that people think that you get herpes from being a slut. That's one of the stories and the experiences that people just assume is how you got it. And I got it from being raped and taken advantage of by one of my guy friends. So, I knew the next day after it happened, I said, "Did you use a condom?" And he said, "No." And I said, "I know you gave me something." I just knew intuitively that that's what happened. And if someone has had this experience, then you know. And if you don't, then maybe this can be something to inform you. But it usually takes about 12 to 15 days for those who have been infected with HSV2 for symptoms to arise. And so it was one of the more traumatizing experiences of my life. And as you can imagine, I've had a number of them. And I didn't know what the fuck was going on in my body. I woke up one day and my vulva was so swollen, it looked like a baby's head was coming out of my vaginal canal. It was so swollen. I couldn't sit, I couldn't pee. And everybody's experience is different. So you could be asymptomatic with herpes and not even know that you have it. You could have zero symptoms at all. However, most times with women, it affects them more severely than it does with men. So men are more typically asymptomatic than women are. And so I called my doctor and went to the doctor, and she took one look at me and said, "You have herpes. We're going to run tests to confirm, but I believe this is what you have, like 99% sure." And we ran the tests, and she's like, "Okay, bye." I was like, "What?
Wait,
No
hello.
information, no nothing? Like, what am I supposed to do? Like, I don't understand, right?" And medicine these days, that's how things have been handled. And I have spoken about my experience with herpes and my experience at the OBGYN a number of times now, and I have learned that a lot of other people and women have had similar experiences where the door is just kind of opened and shut, quite frankly, with no information, no resources, bad tableside manner. And it can make the experience of finding out that you have an STI more traumatizing to be treated like that. So that's not normal. Just for those who are listening, that's not a normal thing that should happen. Unfortunately, it does. So I did have quite the healing journey, and I had to accept myself and learn to love myself with this STI. And once I could get through that, then I had to look at, okay, I was raped, and process losing one of my friends over this experience as well. And so it was about a year of darkness, working through that. And I was single, and I got to have lots of trial and error experiences with communicating with men about the STI, because HSV2 is in your blood. It's something you have forever, and you're more likely to give it to someone else closer to your first outbreak. But it does sleep in your system after, a certain number of years. And there's medicine you can take to suppress it as well, and things you can do to suppress it. However, I I always say I could write a book about the conversations that I had with men, dating and letting them know that I have an STI. Because we're not only not taught about sex, as you mentioned, but we're also not taught about all of the many layers and facets and other parts of the sexual journey and experience too, like STIs, how to handle that, how to open up conversations, how to explain things, when to explain things. We're not taught how to connect to our desires and how to share those with partners or potential partners. So there's so much information that isn't out there and wasn't out there when I needed it. And so I'm so happy to be here now and to shine light on things of that nature. And I'm also really grateful that you're here as well, and beautiful people in this industry that I've been able to connect to, because we get to use our voices and share this information and share our personal experiences, and just let people know that they're not alone, and try to release the stigmas, the taboos, and the untruths that are out there surrounding things like this.
Mm, so beautifully said. So beautifully said. Thank you. Untruths. Hmm. There's not a truer word for, I think, everything that we learn about sexuality in our culture. I'd love to backtrack for a moment. You really spoke to me when you were talking about a year of darkness. And, aside from the podcast, a lot of my listeners know in my sort of, main realm, the world that I operate in has been coaching and facilitating retreats and ceremonies. And I coach a lot of people on relationships. But the healing world is really where I've spent a lot of the last 7 years of my life. So I'm curious if you don't mind sharing what got you through that time. You said it was about a year of darkness before you were really able to sort of reemerge. What were you doing in that time, and what brought you through the darkness to the other side?
That's a great question. So, there's a couple of things that pop up when you originally ask me that. Number one is mirror talk. And I know that sounds so cliche, but let me explain.
I fucking love it already, by the way. We do this on my retreat, but yeah, go ahead.
Good, good, good. So there's a lot of shadow surrounding this, and why this was so healing, because I didn't have education on STIs. I would go as far as saying that I didn't even know that HSV2 existed. I'm like, oh yeah, I've heard of herpes, but I wasn't educated on STIs, what they
Mhm.
are, how to get them. This information is hard to access. Google is very confusing. So I don't recommend Googling any of this. But I had a hard time looking at myself in the mirror. And when I would just feel disgusted with myself. I would feel so gross and tarnished and used, and I had so much shame, um, with myself and my body and my experiences. And at the time, I was a hairstylist. And so I spent all day looking at myself in the mirror, because, they have the big floor to ceiling mirrors. And I had such a hard time making eye contact with myself in that mirror. And I had to get up 2 or 3 hours before I usually did to get ready, because I would do my makeup and just cry. And it's not a normal job where you can just roll out of bed and go to work. I had to do my makeup and my hair and look cute. It's an aesthetically pleasing career. And so it took me a lot more time to do my makeup those days because I had a hard time looking at myself. And so I just got to a point where I'm like, I can do this. I'm just going to look at myself. I'm going to talk to myself. I'm going to love on myself. I'm going to take my clothes off. I'm going to touch myself. I'm going to give myself and my body what it needs: love and acceptance. And it was hard and it sucked, but it was also so fucking beautiful and so needed. And it's one of those exercises that a lot of coaches know and use. And it seems like such a cliche thing, but it's so powerful. Nobody looks at you in the eyes like you look at yourself in the eyes.
Yeah. Wow. Thank you for going there. Thank you. I feel like this conversation is one of the most, I think, beautifully authentic and vulnerable that we've ever had on this show. Being a new show. So I like, for those of you that are just listening and not watching this right now, like, I'm pretty much almost in tears. And Serena, I'm so happy to know you, because so many of us go through these types of things and we never share, because we don't feel like people would accept us or be able to see us. And so I just appreciate you so much, because I know that there's a ton of people listening to this thinking, wow, me too. And maybe they will go get in front of a mirror today or tonight and love on themselves in that way. And yeah, it does sound really cliche, but guys, I've done it, and I've done it with multiple groups of women, sometimes men, and it's powerful. There's really nothing more powerful than you speaking to yourself, and not in the kind of unconscious way that we do all day long, but in a conscious way, a connected way to communicate to yourself. Because if you don't give yourself love, you're not teaching everyone else in the world how to love you.